For tonight, inshallah, we'd like to discuss a particular attribute, a particular characteristic of the person that we commemorate, which is Imam al-Hasan, عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. And that character that we'd like to analyze is the character of morals, in reference to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he states what? He states that I have not been sent except to perfect the manners and morals of mankind. Inshallah, we'd like to discuss the idea of morals and mannerisms in three particular stages. The first and foremost, we'd like to look at the Prophet of Islam. What kind of manners did he have? In summary. Second, we'd like to look at those people that tried to attack the Prophet and how they tried to attack him through his morals and mannerisms. On the second level, we'd like to look at the concept of morals and mannerisms in the stories that we hear from Ahlul Bayt and seek to analyze how we put it into our own lives. And the third and final aspect we'd like to look at, inshallah, is manners and morals on the battlefield. Because there's one stage in where we look at a household perspective, we can look at morals in a work ethic, in a university perspective, there, and then we can look at when someone is angered. That is when we look at war. Truly your essence and your manners and morals will show that which you are angry, is it not? Therefore, we'd like to analyze these three stages to have a brief summary of the idea of morals and mannerisms in the school of Ahlul Bayt. Inshallah, to assist me in starting for tonight, I request everyone to recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When the Prophet comes forth and states in the famous narration, when he says, I have not been sent, ma bu'ithtu, I have not been sent except to perfect the manners and morals of mankind. It's to look at this perspective, what is he trying to teach us? Is it not part and parcel of Islam? Is this one of, or not one of the greatest acts in which you have to instill into your life? Now when we look at the Prophet of Islam, we seek to analyze his life against the oppressors. When the Prophet of Islam comes and he says what? He says, I have not been hurt, or no Prophet has been hurt like I have been. No Prophet of Islam, and when I say Islam, I mean the religion in itself, whether it be Christianity, whether it be Judaism, or whether it be any Abrahamic religion. At the end, inna ad-din 'inda Allah is what? It's Islam. When we look at that perspective, the Prophet says, no Prophet has been hurt as much as I have been hurt. We seek to analyze what has happened. Wa alaykum as-salam. We seek to analyze what kind of hurt did the Prophet acquire? What kind of people attacked the Prophet in his time? When we realize that the Prophet at his beginning stages, people would throw the rocks and the pebbles on him as he walks past them. They would call him the worst of names. When he would prostrate towards Allah, the narration says what? That people will take feces and waste and do what? When the Prophet is in prostration, they would pour it on their head. Isn't it? And Fatima al-Zahra would come and clean it off him. That's why the Prophet says what? He says, Fatimatu ummu abiha. Now look at that character. Look at the Prophet of Islam. With all that which is happening around him, do you see the Prophet of Islam retaliating? Do you see the Prophet of Islam going and doing the same towards that person that attacked him? Let's look at the ethical perspective. Let's look at the morals that the Prophet tries to share. When someone hurts him, what does he say? He says, may Allah forgive them, for they do not know. Isn't it? That's the morals of the Prophet. Let's look at his companions. Let's look at the companions of our first Imam. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, one of his right-hand men, by the name of Malik al-Ashtar. Malik al-Ashtar, the Prophet of Islam, his right-hand man is who? Is Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib says about Malik a particular narration, to give you an analogy of the status of Malik al-Ashtar. He says, Malik is to me like I was to Rasulullah. Now imagine what status Malik al-Ashtar had. Now let's look at him in an ethical perspective. Malik al-Ashtar was the guardian of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's army. The general of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's army. When we find this particular person has this particular rank In the community he is feared, is he not? Anyone nowadays, he has 1 star on him, no one can even come near him or talk to him. Malik al-Ashtar, the general of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's army. And Imam Ali had 50 countries under his reign. Nowadays, if you want to map it out, you find 50 countries he was governing at the time. Malik al-Ashtar was in charge of the armies of all those continents, of the countries. Malik al-Ashtar goes in the marketplace. What happens? A particular person sees Malik al-Ashtar, because he was at an old age. Malik al-Ashtar walks past. This person had a date in his mouth. The narration says he takes the seed of the date out and he throws it at who? At Malik al-Ashtar, the general of Imam Ali's armies. Now you can imagine nowadays, if you go towards the street, you find something that happens, and you realize when every single person looks towards you, if you've done something. Imagine him throwing at Malik al-Ashtar, the general, and everyone around the marketplace looking at him as in, what have you done? You've just thrown a seed at the general of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's army. That's disrespect. That's not showing the heights of manners or morals of Islam. Let's look at Malik al-Ashtar's what? Reaction to this particular aspect and see why Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib says, Malik is to me like I was to Rasulullah. Let's look at it in a moral perspective. Malik al-Ashtar, he finds out that that was the general. So he begins to start sweating, as we say. He's thinking, how am I going to ask for forgiveness from this person? He says, where can I find Malik? Where is it that I can go and find this person that I've thrown a seed at? I am fearful he might get people to come and attack me. He says, Malik is one of Imam Ali's men. Imam Ali's men are always found in the mosques. So this person goes towards the mosque and he sees that's true. Malik al-Ashtar is there praying. So he waits for Malik and waits, and he prays and prays. As soon as he finishes the prayers, he goes towards Malik's feet and he says, forgive me. He says, Malik, forgive me, for I had no idea that you were that particular person. The general of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib's armies, I had no idea. Look at the reply that Malik gave towards that person to give you an analogy of the morals and the status that the companions and the lovers of Ahlul Bayt should have. In the aspect of mercy, in the aspect of following in their footsteps. Malik, what was his reply? He says, do not fear, O man. He says, the reason that I have come towards the mosque is actually you be throwing the seed at me. He says, what do you mean? He says, when you threw the seed at me, I thought to myself, I have to come towards the mosque to pray 2 rak'at towards Allah, so Allah may forgive you for that particular act. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now you think nowadays, if someone came and swore at a particular person, someone came, leave swearing, someone looked at you in a wrong manner, just looked at you in a wrong manner, as we say, gave you a death stare or something like that, we find that person not only has hatred towards that person, he tells his circles that you must also hate this person. You must try to affect this person in a negative manner as much as you can. Isn't it? And what has he done? He has looked at you. That's it. In a wrong manner. And the Imam tries to teach us, even if someone inflicts damage to you, have that aspect of mercy. Let your morals be higher of that person. Because if you do what? If you do exactly what that person did in retaliation, you have lowered your rank to be what? To be equal to that person committing that particular act. Isn't it? For you to have a higher moral standing, you have to overlook that particular act in which has angered you. And seek to analyze, what would the Imam do? What would the companions of the Imam do? If Imam Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman was to see me, would he want me to act in that particular manner? Or would he want me to have the height of morals and forgive that person? Because that forgiveness can actually bring them towards the religion. That act of kindness can get them closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do I mean? Let's look at the person that we are commemorating, Imam al-Hasan. عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. And it's a very known narration, very known story, but let's hear it once again to analyze how a particular act can bring a person to Islam. Not retaliating can bring someone towards Islam. Now to give you an analogy of this particular person comes from a land called Al-Sham. Al-Sham, now we look at it, it's mainly Syria, where Damascus is. Mainly Syria. Let's look at Syria at the time. The narration states that a person went in the time of Muawiyah. And he looks right and left. He wants to find one person by the name of Hassan. One person by the name of Hussein. He says, I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear someone mention those names. I wanted my heart to feel closer towards this particular person. He says, no. Not one person in the marketplace that I have passed had those particular names. He says, until days passed, I found a particular person screaming what? Hassan and Hussein, come to me. He says, I followed that person towards his house. Or once I followed this person towards his house in Syria, he says what? He says, I told the man, can you be hospitable this day? Will you take me in? Will you feed me? He says, of course. Arabs were known for their hospitality. He says, come in. He feeds him. After that, they finish their food. He says, I'll tell you the truth, O Syrian. He says, what is it? He says, the reason of me coming towards your house. He says, why? He says, because I craved to hear the names Hassan and Hussein mentioned in Syria. And I have been here for a couple of days. I have not heard anyone by this name. And as soon as I heard you mention these names, I came towards you to thank you for calling your sons Hassan and Hussein in honor of who? Of the grandchildren of Rasulullah. The man looks at him and begins to smile. What does he say? He says, do not think of it in a wrong manner. He says, why? He says, I have not called my sons Hassan and Hussein in honor of the grandchildren of the Prophet of Islam. Let's look at Syria. Why is it that he names his sons Hassan and Hussein, if not for the honor of the grandchildren of the Prophet? To give you an analogy of where this person that came towards Imam Hassan came from, what kind of circle? The person states what? He says, I have called my sons Hassan and I have called my son Hussein. Why? So when I am angered, when I get angry, I send my curses. My la'na, he says. He says, I send my curses to Hassan and I send my curses to Hussein. That's the time that this person came towards Imam Hassan. This person that came towards Imam al-Hassan, or Imam Hassan عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام, lived in those circles. The people hated Ahlul Bayt in that manner. Let's look at what this person came and said towards Imam Hassan عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. He began to say, where is Hassan? He finds Imam al-Hassan, says, there he is. He's known. He goes towards him. No salam, no eloquence in his speech. Straight away he began to slander the Imam. Imam, you are such and such. Imam, your father is such and such. And he kept going. The Imam didn't interrupt him. Look at the morals of the Imam. I want to tell you, because nowadays we find it, brothers and sisters. Because not only will a person come and say what? That they'll use the foul language, they will become and curse our religion. They'll say, you're Shia, isn't it? You are a follower of Ahlul Bayt. The followers of Ahlul Bayt are such and such. And we hear it on the news, we hear it within the circles, in universities, in groups, within the work environment, do we not? How is it that we should act in this manner? How should we react in this manner? Is it suffice that we retaliate? Would the Imam retaliate? Or let's look at the eloquence of speech of the Imam and how he replied, and seek to put it into our lives. The Imam, after the person has finished, what does he say? Look at the eloquence of the speech of the Imam. He says, oh man, I'd like to ask you, because I believe you are not from these lands. Because he had an accent. He says, I know that you are not from these lands. I want to ask if the atmosphere in this area, if it's too hot, if it has affected you in any manner, if you have a place to stay, or if you don't, because I shall shelter you. Have you had enough food to suffice you, or shall I give you and quench your thirst? The person's thinking to himself, well, I have cursed this particular Imam. I have cursed his father. I have used every single foul language in the books. And look how he replies, in eloquence and in kindness, bringing me towards him. He says, instead of the hate that I came towards the Imam, that hate translated into what? it became love that I had towards the Imam. To say what kind of character is this person that he does not retaliate when I say these particular words? Straight away that person came towards the religion of Islam. When I say religion of Islam, the true religion of Islam, it came towards the path of Ahlul Bayt. Why? Because the Imam didn't retaliate, and he showed him kindness. He showed him manners. He showed him morals. Nowadays in school environments, one person swears at you, that's it. You bring a couple of your friends, you will call the cousins, speed dial. They're there at the end of the school environment, outside the gates, they're there. Is this what Islam preaches to us? Is this what the Imam would do? Would the Imam be happy with these actions of ours? That's the true question that we must ask ourselves. That's number two. So that's an aspect of the morals and how people would react. In the example that we gave of Malik al-Ashtar being a companion. And the other example is with the person that we commemorate tonight, which is Imam Hassan, عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. Let's look at it in a perspective where a person cannot control himself. And when I say that, I say when he is angered. Because Shaitan says what? He says one of my soldiers, one of my tools to get towards a person or to allow a person to sin is when he is angered. When he is angry, he is not using the complete sense of his intellect. If he's angry other than for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now let's look at it. On the battlefield, let's look at the battlefield. It's a war that rages. You will take every single chance you have. However, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, they have particular stances. Do they or do they not have morals and ethics even in the battlefield? Even in the midst of war, the Imams would have particular rules that you must follow. Particular ethical perspectives, morals that you have to follow. What are some examples? Let's look at it. And let's try to have an example and put it into contrast with what's happening overseas. Such as ISIS or people like those people that say that we are Muslim, except they go against every single teaching in the book of Islam. Let's look at it. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he tells his people in his battles, the 3 battles that he waged, whether it be Jamal, whether it be Siffin or Nahrawan, Imam Ali, what do he say? In the battlefield, he says, before we begin the battle, know that we shall not start. That's why even in Karbala, we say the same stance. Imam Hussein say, do not what? Do not fight until they have started. The first arrow would come. He say, do not start. The second arrow would be shot against the Imam. He says, do not start. The third arrow would be shot against the Imam. Then he would say what? May Allah bear witness that I have not started this battle. He says, I am defending myself. The Prophet, all his wars were in defense, was it not? Then we had other Khalifas that come forth and attack. Imam Ali, let's look at the morals in the battlefield. He says, if there is a child, you do not attack him. If there is a woman, she is not attacked. Look at ISIS. No such thing as children, women, no decency, no sense of honor, no respect. Not to Islam, to humankind. The basic necessities and morals of mankind, they do not meet it. How about the height of morals and mannerism, which is Islam? Nowhere close to it. What else? He says if someone is wounded, do not attack him. Look at the ethics. He says if someone runs away from war, do not follow him. Don't follow him. Imam Ali, even when he has face-to-face combats, what does he say? He says, I give you 3 choices. And if he says it to Amr ibn Abdul al-Amiri, he says either what? Either you back out, and I'm giving you a chance to go back. You don't have to fight Islam. Amr ibn says, that's not an option because I've come to fight Islam. He says, number 2, you can do what? You can come towards the religion of Islam and become Muslim. There doesn't have to be a battle. He says, all 3, basically, you will have to fight me, in which Imam Ali will be triumphant. Isn't it? So even then, in the battlefield, he gives him a chance. Now let's look at a particular act of Ali ibn Abi Talib that the Prophet has a narration, and I want to end on this note, inshallah, and one more story of the ethics of Zayn al-Abidin, and we end for tonight, inshallah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam states that this a particular act of Ali ibn Abi Talib, if put on a balance, one act, one single act of worship of Ali ibn Abi Talib, if put on a balance, on a scale of worship, on one side, on the other side, the worship of al-thaqalain. What does that mean? It means both human and jinn, doesn't it? It says the worship of both these on one scale, and this one act of Ali ibn Abi Talib on the other, it would outweigh it. What's this act of Ali ibn Abi Talib? And why does it hold such a high perspective in the religion of Islam, in the Prophet's eyes and in Allah? Because the Prophet is what? وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. When the Prophet says something, surely it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What was this act? I want to give you an idea of it. Imam Ali on the battlefield, he's fighting a warrior that's so ferocious that the people of Medina allowed the kuffar to enter because he had that one person in the army. Because they said, this one person, you have him, that's it. We have victory. That was Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri. He comes out towards Ali ibn Abi Talib. They exchange strikes until Ali ibn Abi Talib strikes him, his foot's off, he lays on the dirt. The Muslims are thinking, what? Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri is down. Ali ibn Abi Talib approaches him, that's it. It's finished. Then when the dust of the battlefield drops and you begin to realize what's happening, they see Amr ibn Abd al-Amiri on the floor. Ali ibn Abi Talib, where is he? He's circulating him. And circulating him. Until what? Until they see Ali ibn Abi Talib at a point after circulating him, approach Amr ibn Abd and finish him off. Then they ask him, when the Prophet said that particular statement, what is it that you did that the Prophet of Islam said that that one act of Ali ibn Abi Talib is so grand, is so great? Why didn't you finish him off then and there? Look at Ali ibn Abi Talib when he is angered. He says, as in the midst of battle, you're not hitting any Tom, Dick and Harry, you're hitting a ferocious warrior. The narration states what? He used to wrestle with lions. When the news reached his sister, she begins to laugh. She cares, there is no way a person would kill my brother. He wrestles lions for fun. You bring me these news, of course I will not believe you. He says, when we exchanged strikes and I got him and he fell on the floor. As I was about to kill him, I had the upper hand. He says, as I was about to strike him, he spat at me. He says, that spit made me what? Made me angry. I was angered. As I was about to strike, I stopped. In the middle of a strike, imagine. He says, I stopped. Why? Why Ali? Why have you stopped? You have him right there. You can finish him, the ferocious warrior. He says, I feared at that stage, if I was to strike him, that anger that I had was not for Allah solely. That it might have some inclination of my nafs, that I want to hit him for my anger and not for the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I stopped. He says, until what? I began to rotate and rotate, to calm myself down, to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that what? This is why I am here. The anger is gone. He begins to what? Approach Amr and finish him. At that level. That's why Ali ibn Abi Talib says what? He says, every act that I do, he says, I see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before, during and after the act. Whether he would be pleased with me before it. Whether he is pleased with me when I am doing that particular act. And if he is pleased with me after. That's Ali ibn Abi Talib. That's why we have people that follow his footsteps like Malik al-Ashtar. That's why we have it nowadays, brothers and sisters. On an ending perspective, inshallah, we want to take the idea that what? Do not retaliate. The idea taken from tonight is do not act in a manner that will what? That will allow the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman, to be angered with you. do not act in that manner. Always think, will this action that I do bring me closer towards Allah? Gain me respect from the Imam? Will the Imam be pleased with me? Remember that part and parcel of every single act. Now on an ending perspective, and let's look at this idea before I hand the microphone and the pulpit over to our beloved Sheikh. Imam Zain al-Abidin. Imam Zain al-Abidin, inshallah, in the upcoming nights, if you have an opportunity, we'll talk about Risalat al-Huquq, the idea of what? The treatise of rights. He gives every single thing a right. 50 rights he writes in this book. Every single detail, even your feet, your eyesight, your stomach, has a right over you. And he goes into detail. Let's look at the morals of this man, of Imam Zain al-Abidin. What kind of morals did he have? In a time in the reign of a Khalifa by the name of Hisham ibn Ismail, this particular person was removed from his governor position. Now imagine he had such a high rank and prestige. He would do what? He would attack the Imam in a manner that he would cause him discomfort. So much so that not only him, his family as well, that when he was removed from governorship and he was put in front of his what? In front of his people. And the person removing him said what? Anyone that wants anything from this person, come and take it from him. Come and attack him. Come and humiliate him. In front of everyone. Imagine. Imagine the level of hurt that he had towards the Imam. That this particular Hisham ibn Ismail states what? He says, I fear no one except Ali ibn al-Hussein. No one. Imagine how much people he's hurt. And how much he's hurt Ali Zain al-Abidin. That he says, I fear no one except Ali Zain al-Abidin, from the amount of hurt that I have caused him and his family. Imagine Imam Zain al-Abidin at that time. He finds out, the companions come to him, they say, well, such and such has happened. Come, let's take our revenge. Look at the ethics of the Imam, to give you an idea what we shall do, what we should be doing and how we should follow in the footsteps. The Imam replies to him saying what? He says, oh Hisham, he says, if you have a debt, look at the specifics. He says, if you have a debt, an outstanding debt that you have, he says, we will pay it for you. If you are in need of food or you are in need of water, we will quench your thirst and we will feed you. Imagine that particular person thinking to himself, this particular person that I have attacked and I have caused discomfort to him and his family during all these years, he comes nowadays and says what? In the time that I have been removed, I have no more power. He says, I will help you even that you have caused me during these years hurt and discomfort in living in Medina. And there's many more stories of Zain al-Abidin, عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام, that we can look at and ponder what kind of people were these Ahl al-Bayt. What kind of ethics and morals did these beacons of light have? And how much can we actually gain from these people? It's truly a drop in the ocean of what we have. What we have in our books, what we have in our libraries. It's a drop in the ocean of what we know about these people. And even then, that drop, we have not even sufficed in looking into that particular drop. And then there's the whole other aspect of actually applying it to our lives. I end on this note, brothers and sisters, inshallah. And I thank you all for listening attentively. But I want everyone to take it from tonight, inshallah, and try to apply. It doesn't matter if it's your friends, if it's your family that oppose that which you do. It doesn't matter. Someone, you may do a particular act and say to yourself what? That this person may look down upon me. For example, if you're in a group of friends, this particular person turns on the music in the car. You're thinking to yourself, well, my friends around me, if I tell them to put that music off, they'll look at me and say, come on. As in, get with the times. This is the 21st century. So you think to yourself, what? Well, to gain the respect of my friends, I will let them play this particular act of haram. Or if you go towards a particular place, or take illegal substances. It's that particular peer pressure. Whether it be your friends, whether it be your own family, whether it be the people that you hang out with on a daily basis. What does the Prophet of Islam teach us? Kalimullah. What does he teach us? And I've mentioned this on the nights of Muharram, but we shall reiterate it to give you an idea that it does not matter whether it's your friends or family or your group, that is the ones that you work with. Doesn't matter who it is. You must do everything for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's this particular story, inshallah? Musa alayhi salam asked this particular question to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, the people talk ill of me. Oh Allah, will you not stop them? They say that which is untruthful. They backbite. Will you, oh Allah, not stop these people? Look at the reply of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you'll begin to analyze how easy we have it on nowadays, that we can only say no. All we have to do is say no. Walk the other way. Those group of friends that take you towards that which is haram, you must ask yourself why you are hanging around them in the first place. Go towards those circles which are halal, which bring you closer towards Allah. When Musa asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's the reply? Allah says, Musa, I have not given myself that honor. As in what? As in people talk ill of me. Have I stopped them? People say I do not exist. Have I stopped them? People say there are more than one. Have I stopped them? He says, Musa, why should you have an honor in which I do not? So it doesn't matter. Put it into perspective. If you take nothing from tonight, make sure you take this particular idea and try to apply it into your life. It doesn't matter who it is. As long as you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with your actions, then you should be sufficed. We take that into account, brothers and sisters. And I end on this note, inshallah. And I pray to Allah that He makes us and resurrects us of the companions of Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. And He resurrects us amongst the people that hold firm to the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And inshallah we end with a Fatiha, but before it, a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.